Hey friends, this is a foray into longer form content. It's about, you can see, about 2 hours. Just we talk with Steadfast and TheStarcraftObserver about IEM Katowice, all the good games, all the crazy stuff. So if you like this, please let me know in the comments. Like it, do those things. DM me on Twitter. I don't care. But before we do that, of course, like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. And also, I do stream on Twitch every Monday and Saturday. Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern for EPT North America. Every Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern for EPT Korea. And at 3 p.m. Eastern for the Apprentice Cup. And also, a little more often when the NA Apprentice starts doing. Normally, those are Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7 p.m. Eastern until the replays are done with. But it's a little bit more variable. Of course, it depends what's available. But anyways, you've heard from me long enough. On to the show. Hey everyone, I figured we'd talk about IEM Katowice for a little bit in this show that does not have a name just yet. That's totally fine. You know me, I'm Behemoth. With me, it's Steadfast, the other half of the Balefast B-Stream Archon, whatever you want to call it. Also, we got Nish, the StarCraft Observer. It's a week since Katowice. How's everyone's days going?
Yeah, it's going pretty good, man. It's nice and toasty over here in Virginia, a good 60 degrees. It's been pretty damn cold the last few days, but it was good to get outside and still recovering from the IEM games that just recently happened. So many good stuff, so much good stuff. How about you, Steadfast?
Yeah, I'm still a little bit hungover in terms of like the exhaustion factor, and yeah, it was a lot of stuff, both as a commentator and as a viewer. There's a lot to consume, but yeah, I'm doing well. It's a little colder up here in the Great White North. We use the base 10 units, so we're in the negatives here.
Oh wow!
But yeah, it's all good.
Oh man, I wish we could use the base 10 units. There was a plan like 50 years ago to transition the US, and then we just didn't. And let me tell you, as someone who works in aerospace, working in Imperial units is just the worst thing ever. Yeah, but you talk about that hangover, Steadfast. I mean, day one was not even nearly as bad, at least from a wow, I'm exhausted setup. I know you and I didn't get a lot of sleep, but at least it was only 6 best of 3s. But I'm going to be crazy here, but I feel like the round of 36 was maybe the best singular day of StarCraft we had of the entire event. Maybe round of 12 holds a candle to that, but man, with so many stories.
Yeah, it was pretty jam-packed start to finish. We got a lot of good mileage out of the round of 36, especially considering when you look at the round of 36, you kind of don't really expect anyone who makes it out of there on paper, at least going into it. This one was already kind of a little bit funky because it was going to be different from the get-go with who we had there. But you don't really expect anyone to have even like a chance of making it out of the round of 24. But not only did we get some huge surprises, we actually did get, I think it was just the one player out of the round of 36 making it into the round of 12, which is a pretty amazing result.
Yeah, and you talk about that. I mean, Ryung's run was stuff of legends. I want to say we'll be talking about this until the cows come home. I don't know that everyone was as excited about it as you or I were, but this 31-year-old player who has been playing, who was signed to Slayers like 6 months after StarCraft was released, is in the top 12 of IEM Katowice, off a player who should not have qualified. I mean, Nish, that's crazy.
Yeah, and didn't he just get out of like the military as well? Like
Year and a half ago, yeah.
Yeah, and for him to like come fresh out of the military, get back into StarCraft, after not playing for almost like a year and a half, I think it's like 12 months, I think 60 months mandatory service, and then getting back into the seat again, and then getting this far into the tournament was that's an amazing story, dude. Like who I'm not sure of anybody else who's done that, but yeah, that was an incredible run by Ryung, man. I was like super thrilled about that too. And yeah, round of 36, even as just like a spectator who tries to keep up with esports and just went into it with the observer mentality, yeah, the whole round of 36 kind of set up everything that was to come. And me and one of my friends who just started watching tournaments again was like, dude, these games are just absolutely incredible, especially for the round of 36. Like every single game that I watched was just nonstop action, especially like just throughout the day, man. It was hard to keep an eye on everything, especially when I had work. Going to different streams, going to like the main stream, B stream, C stream. It was just tons of action, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really was. And Steadfast, we talked about it every day we were live, but specifically the death of Protoss in the round of 36 at the hands of that 6-minute stim timing that we saw Ryung throw out. I think that was Ryung's run certainly was the most unexpected thing, but the underperformance of players like Hero and Creator and then the Zest and Trap as we moved on, that's got to be one of the secondary stories of the tournament, right?
Yeah. Besides the success, you also have to talk about the failures, and that was Protoss as a race failed at IEM Katowice. It started early and it continued for the entire event. We had obviously the round of 36 had some interesting results, with primarily the biggest one I think being Hero not making it out. First off the back of PvP, and then second falling to Ryung, who looked like a returning like champion. Like he looked as though, Muhammad Ali had just come back in terms of like boxing. Like he looked like a contender to win the whole tournament if he was playing. Unfortunately, his TVZ just didn't match up to his other matchups, but his TVP and even his TVT to a certain extent both looked capable of taking down just about anyone going into the round of 36. So like it wasn't as though Hero played poorly, it was just that Ryung played out of his freaking mind. But already for me, Hero was a player that I picked to make it to the round of 8. I was for me, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to make it through the round of 36, but it just didn't happen. And, it's one bad day of StarCraft and you lose at that point one of maybe 4 players for Protoss that could make it into the round of 8, round of 12. So that's already a huge blow for Protoss, and obviously we'll talk about the round of 24 later, but I think the biggest story by far was, Ryung making it through, Hero not.
Yeah, I actually had Ryung set up, or excuse me, I had Classic set up, or wow, not Classic, Creator set up as this player who was absolutely going to make it through as well. And I know that's a interesting scenario because we can always talk about, offline Creator, he's never going to do anything. But the man had some insane win rates in the matchup, or in every matchup, actually, heading on into Katowice. He had I want to say, a 80% PVZ win rate, which I thought was going to be a lot more impactful than it was. But as much as the story of the top 4, 3 of the 4 being Zerg, everyone making it out, PVZ actually did not end up being impactful in the slightest. We had... I don't think we had a single PVZ in that round of 36. Maybe one. Yeah, we had one. I guess 2 technically, and Creator did beat DRG, but not nearly as much of a thing. And then certainly in the round of 8, we had, Neeb taking down a game off Rogue, but that was the only big result there in the group stage. So Creator not making it, and as you said, Hero, I had him round of 4, Nish.
Yeah. I mean, like just seeing all these like Protosses like falling out and stuff left and right was a big surprise, especially like for me, seeing Trap get knocked out too was like a big one. Like I did not like see that happening, and like as we were progressing through the day, it was just like, okay, yeah, this Protoss race isn't gonna make it. Just like Steadfast said, like it was a big downfall, but it's pretty incredible to see like all these other players just stepping up and just playing their hearts out too. So. Yeah, I mean, we got what we got in the end, and it was absolutely incredible, dude.
Yeah, I mean, we did have, there's some big storylines out of the round of 36. Steadfast, how about Spirit's run through the upper bracket? That was not on my radar going into this.
No, it was. I don't think it was on anyone's radar. And it was really, really cool to have a Polish player be able to make it to the main stage to compete in front of a Polish crowd. Everyone remembers Mana's legendary run in, I believe it was 2015, where he got to the grand finals. He ultimately did fall to Lil Bao. Lil Bao was, far and away the best foreign player at that point. But he even took 2 games off of him, and it was an incredible result. Everyone was hype as hell about it. The crowd was super behind him, but they still were, cheering on Lil Bao. after he won. Like, it was a really, really cool event. And then he shows up 2-0's DRG, 2-1's Estrella, and then 3-2's Nice in probably... it's so unfair to this particular series because there was like 6 best of 5s or best of 7s that were like all-time great series. And I would say this was one of them in terms of just like how insane it was. Specifically, this series was probably... like there were multiple times in each game, each series of Spirit and Nice where both players, it felt like, was dead or were dead for, many minutes at a time. And it ended up going the distance down to game 5 with Spirit barely making it through. And ultimately that would be a really unfortunate thing for Nice because he would then run into Ryung, who his TVP looked ultimate, like truly world class, and he eliminated so many other players and he just bopped Nice and it didn't look close, which is such a shame. But it really highlights, one, how crazy the run of Spirit and Ryung both were. Spirit, like, Nice looked really good against him, and then Ryung just bopped the crap out of him. And then 2, how brutal it can be if you just get a bad bracket.
Yeah, man, this is one of those guys that, like, with Spirit, the way how he just utilizes Widow Mines, dude. Widow Mines all over the map, dude. Just dropping them left and right, trying to pull his opponent every each way, just trying to distract him. And it was just such incredible to see this guy, man. Like, just multitask to the max and just trying to, like, max out their opponent's, like, thought process, essentially. And, we saw that throughout, like, the series, too. He's just pulling his opponent every each way. So I really enjoyed all the series that Spirit played. Like, he was one of my people that caught my attention during this tournament as well. So
he's long had this story, right, of this. Oh, he is Cyril's late game practice partner. This guy that absolutely online you're gonna be smashed by him if it's not a tournament. And it was so cool to see him at least show some of that promise. Although, as we'll talk about in just a minute, I feel like some of his success made his life a lot harder as we moved on into the group stages. But to put a pin on the round of 36, we have these really 2 surprises, right? Spirit through the upper bracket, Ryung through the lower. But I don't think our other 2 qualifiers, and Beyond and Estrella, were all that surprising, especially considering how many of the players that we expected to qualify Ryung knocked out.
Yeah, I mean, he knocked out like Hero and Nice and like who else? Creator. Like, he was just all these other players, man. It's crazy. Like, I'm looking at the bracket right now, and he was just climbing through it. Like, he 2-0'd Hero, 3-0'd Nice, dude. He was on a roll, dude.
Yeah. So I guess that really was the round of 36. The story of 2 halves. You had Beyond. I mean, he dropped a single map, and that map was to Ryung that told us just how good Ryung was. And you have Spirit we talked about that. But on the flip side, you had Estrella, who had a fairly decent run. He lost to Spirit, but okay, Spirit qualified the upper bracket. The expected and the unexpected. But that really was the round of 36. I don't know if there's anything I'm missing, Steadfast. Any stories you want to talk about?
The only thing is that a couple of players had to drop out due to COVID. So or COVID related situations, even if they didn't get it themselves. But that made for the top half of the bracket, the little quadrant where Euthermal came out of. It made for it being a lot weaker than it really had any business being for the round of 36. So instead of, I think Euthermal replaced Ragnarok.
Yes. So
instead of Ragnarok kind of being a shoe-in to get out of that part of the bracket, it ended up being Euthermal in a group with Haas, Cyan, Kelazur, and Euthermal, which was great news for Euthermal. Replacement Man showed up, but ultimately it would have been a lot closer of a qualifying match, I think, if it was beyond Ragnarok instead of beyond Euthermal.
But on the flip side, it did mean that while we didn't have the memes of Mr. Replacement Man and that Euthermal getting advanced, we did have Mr. Replacement Man 2.0 and Ryung as the player who literally did not win a tournament game before Katowice. He qualified off of GSL qualifier points. You get EPT points, about 65 per, for doing well enough in GSO qualifiers. That was the only reason he was in Katowice. So we did have the miracle run. It just was not Uthermal, not this time.
Yeah.
And in fairness, Ryung didn't even benefit from the soft bracket. He lost to Beyond and then had to beat he had to beat Creator and then Hero and then Nice to do that. So insane. But let's move back to the round, or let's move up to the group stage now, I think. That seems like a good thing to do, because as good as the round of 36 was, and I said maybe one of the all-time great days of StarCraft,
Yeah.
that's not taking anything away from the group stage.
Yeah. Group stages were awesome, dude. Yeah, I was really stoked. After, what the round of 36 was like a 12, 14-hour day for you guys? Like, how long was that for you guys?
Round of 36 wasn't too bad. I want to say it was like 10 or 11 hours. It wasn't.
It was short, yeah.
It was manageable for sure. It was manageable. And like there wasn't insanely long periods of downtime, which was very nice. But that would obviously change up a little bit for the group stage.
Yeah, group stage was just a little bit different. Certainly, we had those nice. So the way it worked, actually, if anyone is curious, we would run ahead of the mainstream for 4 of the 5 sets of games. So we would start 15 minutes early, go there, go there, go there. But they wanted to sync up the last series of each group, so we would, I guess, because we wouldn't get too far ahead, and also mainstream had to figure out what they were doing for that final series, what would be most impactful to put on stage, and then we would figure that out. So we had to wait for them. But because we would always run ahead, so they never wanted to wait for us, we had those really long breaks, specifically on day 2 when you had Clem versus Scarlet and Maru Raynor holding things up an hour and a half, which I got to watch Grid StarCraft. It was fine. But Steadfast, I think probably the biggest story out of the round of 36 was how well Zerg did. In that, we had Scarlet fail to get out and Lambo fail to get out, but as good as Scarlet was looking, I don't think that is the most unsurprising thing. In a group where a player we expect to do really well could top the group, they absolutely did.
Yeah, Zerg did really well in the round of 24. They now it is worth noting that we didn't really talk about this in the round 36, but Zerg did not win a series. They only won 1 map. Now it wasn't a ton of matches, but it was still 4 series, and they were no slouches. It was DRG and a laser, so they're not bad players. They're players that are just below these players we see here in terms of like the tier list, and you could even make an argument that a laser or DRG are in the same realm as both Scarlet and Lambo, who of course, did bomb out of their groups, but Solar probably is the best performer for all of these in terms of like who you would say you can't even say outperformed, because these are the top 5 Zergs in the world. You ask anyone and you have to say Serral, Rogue, Dark, Raynor, Solar. It doesn't matter what the order is. I think everyone would agree that Solar is the 5th on that list, but you would absolutely put Serral, Dark, Rogue, Raynor, Solar as your top 5 Zergs. Like you can't have that discussion in good faith and say anything other than that top 5. But to see all of them come out as the top of their groups, and I believe it was only Solar who dropped a non-Zerg matchup in that, and that was the first matchup of the day versus Spirit. Dropped it 1-2, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, Zerg did really, really well in the group stages. Really freaking well.
Yeah, especially with Serral, dude. Like, I didn't expect him to go 5-0. Like, at least like lose 1 map, right? Or just
10-0. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, dude, that's insane. Like, this is what we're in for. This guy, like, he really wants it, And then, with Solar too, I was so happy to see like, Solar come out 4-1 in his group, and Raynor as well, like, 5-0. So yeah, man, it was getting really excited. I was hoping for Solar to like, go further in the tournament. It would have been an awesome like redemption, for compared to what was it like last year's when he got nuked. So I that's the redemption that I wanted to go for. But it was incredible, dude. Like I said, like being a spectator and just like watching these games, like round of 36 set it up perfectly for like the following day for the group stages.
Yeah, we definitely had group stage Solar, who he 2-0s Rogue. He actually gets the tiebreaker off that to qualify in, and then he's the only He's the only Zerg to fall in the round of 8, I think. So certainly we did have group stage solar, but what I thought was really interesting is this is the first time, to my knowledge, where we've had a reigning GSL champion, as in a GSL champion who has won a GSL in the last calendar year, fall out in the group stage, and that Cure did not make it out off of what ended up being insane games final series against Dream, but even still, Rogue not taking it, or Rogue 2-0ing him, Cure looked surprisingly shaky considering how much it felt that he had kind of maybe solved his offline issues.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising. Now you do have to mention the fact that, like playing at GSL, you don't have to travel for it. It's none of the unpleasantness of that, but it's still something that we kind of were hoping that he was past. So it is very unfortunate and a little bit disappointing. It's always, there's always a little bit of that, because I do feel like with the talent you have in Korea, winning GSL it doesn't mean that you're necessarily the best player in the world. It just means that you were the best in your matches that you played. Whereas I feel like a match or a tournament like IEM Katowice, this is the one where every single person in the world who is capable of playing at a top level is coming absolutely prepared to play, and they're bringing their best selves forward. Now, I know that a lot of people do that with GSL, but you're missing out on like the entire foreign scene, and you can't you can't neglect that anymore. It's not 2013. It's not 2015 even. Like, you have to acknowledge that foreigners are able to compete at the absolute top level.
Yeah, the other thing we need to talk about, and actually I think we'll talk about Group C and D a little bit later, but this is a good reason why Joon was so good, is that GSL is a very different setup, a very different format compared to literally every other tournament that gets played, in that you have weeks between series, between preparations. When you're looking at the GSL, you have to prep for maybe 3 other people, but realistically, you're maybe not prepping for all of them, just simply because, okay, maybe there's one you're probably not going to play, or you say, I can lose this, whatever. In round robin group stage, you got to prep for everyone, because every map, every series matters, and that is a very different preparation style. And it makes sense. We saw Jo-un qualify, beating Maru, which maybe there was some exhaustion there. Maybe Maru didn't care as much because he'd already qualified out. But that was in line. Jo-un very much a playoff, a bracket runner. He's done so well in GSL Super tournaments in the past, and that is never, well, I can't even say that, because Cure, I mean, he came to dominance from playing all qualifiers back in 2015 for IEM, finally qualifying through Europe. So maybe that's not the argument we can make right there.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's ultimately, there's just so many factors in a tournament like IEM Katowice. It's travel is a big factor. Like, there's a whole lot to it. It's not really an easy answer, but either way, Cure just didn't have it when he needed to. And I think a lot of that is he was in a very tough group where you can't really prepare for one specific player, because the group was just so stacked going into it. But also, I think it was Dream showing up. Dream had a really, really great tournament, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but he actually should have beaten Maru, like definitively should have beaten Maru.
Very much so. That was a great series as well. The other pair we should talk about, because there was only one, well, I guess there were 2 foreigners because Spirit qualified in, but only one foreigner directly qualified into Group A. That was Neeb, and we didn't really know a lot about his form going in. He was not really all that heralded. No one had seen it much about him practicing, but he took game 1 against Rogue, and as we look at this series right now, it was very much looking like he might have 2-0'd Rogue if he had maybe not respected him as much as he did. And then, of course, he ruined Spirit's hopes later on. So the funny story, we talk about how much Protoss have kind of underperformed, but it felt like the foreign Protoss, I mean, Jo-un, again, the exception, maybe fought above their level a little bit more than we saw the Korean Protoss doing. I mean, we saw Zest knock out, Trap barely squeak through. Jo-un, again, he's the exception to all of this, but Neeb taking down Spirit, almost taking down Rogue. Astrea having some great series later on. Is this a matter of, do you think different metas forming up, or am I just totally misreading this?
I think anything with Neeb is like a little bit weird because like we even still don't really know what his form. Even after the tournament, we don't know how well he was playing because series to series he was a different player. And yeah, he should have 2-0'd Rogue. He should have definitely won the series, which would have really turned the group on its head because Rogue had already dropped a series
To
Solar. Yeah, and that would have put him at 1-2. And it would have really like made the group a lot more stressful because Rogue was playing some very, very aggressive strategies that were like very high risk but very high reward. And maybe he doesn't pull that out against Dream in the 4th series if he's, in a situation where he needs to win or he doesn't qualify. I don't know. Maybe some things change a little bit. It's obviously it's all speculative, but it's worth having the discussion about. Something that I think would have been really interesting actually is if instead of Spirit in Group A, if we'd had Creator. I think it would have actually really changed the discussion about ZVP that everyone's having right now, because I think Creator would have beaten Solar, and I think he probably would have beaten Rogue too. I know that once again all speculative, but I think Creator makes it out of that group if he's tossed into Group A instead of Spirit.
Yeah, and again, kind of maybe a hot take here just a little bit, but Creator was the guy that I had pegged as the big upset out of the round of 36. I thought he was going to do a lot more than people did. The guy hit 6.8K on Korea 2 weeks before Katowice. He's got 80% PVZ win rate in the last 2 weeks. In the last 2 weeks leading up to Katowice. So I agree. I think he absolutely takes down Solar, takes down Rogue there, and then everything's a wash. But Nish, the way things had worked out, it did mean that we got one of the craziest TVTs we've had the pleasure of watching to determine who got out in 3rd place in Cure and Dream.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, they're normally like when I go into TVTs, I'm not really stoked about them. Just because like I myself don't enjoy playing TVTs, but this was one of those that like I really enjoyed, and seeing them like duke it out back and forth. It was incredible to see, dude. And I agree with Steadfast. If we would have like switched out Spirit with Creator, we would have seen something totally different. Especially like one of the games that I can recall was Spirit and Neeb, and especially like how he was like having to deal with Spirit's gameplay, right? Like I mentioned earlier, like Spirit's Widowmine play was like all over the map, and Neeb was having like a hard time dealing with that. But it was incredible to see like how Neeb's thought process post game, like how he was like trying to manage everything. It was just so difficult, but trying to determine the times of when the Widow Mines dropped into his mineral line, and knowing that like, okay, this amount of time I can go and check on my other base, because something about like I think Widow Mines take like 26 seconds before they shoot off or something like that. I can't recall, but yeah, just seeing that match in between them two was awesome. But yeah, dude, we got one of the like sickest TVTs in there, dude.
Yeah, we really did Steadfast. It's not often a TVT comes down to singular units. It comes down to minerals because there's no gas left. And that really is what happened as Dream managed to qualify. I mean, you even look at what's happening right now. Cure has 3,000 gas, but he can't spend it. And Dream's army is just a little bit better. It really one of the sickest important games that we've had. I mean, we have crazy things happen, but this game was to determine who of Dream and Cure advanced into the playoffs.
Yeah, and it was really, really high stakes, of course, and it came down to the absolute wire. Like Dream it was a base trade. They were both maxed out. Dream had a bank of like 4K, 2.5K starting off the base trade, and Cure managed to kill almost all of his production. And he had like a Viking lead. I thought it was super back and forth. And I actually thought Cure had it for like a decent bit of time, but Dream just barely managed to get enough eco and enough production up that he was able to like barely pinch it off. But it came down to such an insanely close margin for error. And once again, it's all speculative, but if you have, instead of instead of Dream in the round of 12 versus Maru, it's Cure versus Maru in the round of 12. Who knows what happens there? Like things can get very crazy, and it was just really cool to see, and we were very fortunate to get blessed with like amazing games right out of the gate.
And then it really didn't stop because, well, maybe the average game in Group B was not as inspiring. Certainly the storylines were maybe even better. And the first thing we got to talk about is, of course, the fact that Cyril did not drop a single map in Group B. He 5-0'd, and sure, there was a lot of chatter on the internet of, okay, realistically, it's Cyril. The only person that can beat him is Dark in this group, probably, and if Dark doesn't do it, then no one will. I take exception to that. I think Time could maybe do it in a best of 3, considering how good he looked in Last Chance. But you talk about a premonition of what was to come. That was scary.
Yeah, man. Like I mentioned earlier, like seeing that like 5-0 and he didn't drop a single map. That was just, like I said, this is something that he's wanted. You know, this trophy that's been escaping him, right? And that was like a telltale sign of what was to come. You know, this guy just being the dominant force of this tournament. So,
Steadfast.
Yeah, it's funny that we didn't even really talk about it that much. Like, it got mentioned a little bit, but there was so many other amazing storylines from the round of 24 that Cyril, you know, he came out first in his group. They're like, yeah, that's really good. Oh yeah, he 2-0 Dark. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, 10-0. Oh man, he's the only one undefeated. That's really good. But it kind of got brushed aside because of who Cyril is and because he's such a legendary player. We're like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, for like, that's really good, but like, it's Cyril. Like, it's not that big of a surprise, but it really was a foreshadowing or I guess foreshadowing for the other players of what was to come, because that would be the another one of the storylines is that Cyril didn't drop a single map besides one to Maru up until the grand finals. He only dropped one map before the grand finals of the World Championship, with probably the highest skill cap of the aggregate number of players of like maybe of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it cannot be understated just how absolutely stacked this tournament was. But I think maybe another reason we're looking at this, like, okay, Cyril 5-0, 10-0. Dark did that last year, and he didn't win the entire thing. He lost in, I believe, the round of 4. So, oh, great. Things are swapped. Dark and Cyril were in the same group last year. Last year was Dark. They won 5-0, 10-0. This has happened before. It's not all that crazy. But the big story big story in Group B is really twofold. First and foremost, we've been talking about it. Ryung just pulling miracles, straight up pulling miracles, riding that protagonist energy all the way through. But on the flip side, it was Time who had his life in his hands as late as his series against Ryung, and it just all fell apart. Steadfast.
Yeah. Well, I think he might have even had his life in his hands up to the series versus special. I think if he had 2-0'd special, definitely if he 2-0'd special. I think even just a series win versus special would have made it through for him. I think even a 2-1 win, because that would have changed his scoreline from 4-8 to 6-7, and that would have beaten Ryung. That would have put him ahead of Ryung. So even up until the very last map, he had his destiny in his hands, and we had really high hopes for Time. He had an amazing showing at the DreamHack Masters Last Chance, where Maru was looking so dominant, not just in the game overall, but in TVT. And then Time started off the series against him in the round of 4 with a win, and we were like, oh my God, is a foreign, like a non-Korean player going to beat Maru in a TVT? Like, is this happening? And then, Maru turned it on, but still Time looked very, very worthy as an opponent. And he starts off with a strong victory over Showtime 2-0, takes the game off of Dark, and we're like, okay, all right, Is he gonna challenge for first place in this group? That was on the table after the third map of Time's run. And then he loses to Dark, and you're like, okay, but he should still probably make it through. Gets 2-0'd by Serral. You're like, okay, it's Serral. Serral's doing real well. And then he runs into Ryung. And yeah, Ryung just absolutely steps it up and takes it to him.
Yeah, and that was
even up, or sorry, go on. Even up into the last series, yeah, he had his fate in his hands, and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and that was even after Time took map 1 on Ryung in fairly dominant fashion. But something actually we talked about during the cast at Fast, it felt like Ryung was just, or Time was just impatient. He did not want to play late game against anyone. We saw him with these big leads, stimming in and losing just about everything. This was not a single game. This was multiple series in a row, which, look, it gave us reason to freak out. It gave us a great series, but I almost wonder whether Time feels just really unconfident in the late game, which would be a big difference from how he looked in Last Chance. He played some excellent late game in all the matchups.
Yeah. He, I don't know, it was Berlingrad, I think. Yeah, it was Berlingrad, which was game 3 versus Ryung. And a victory there would have, hindsight is 2020, but it would have put him through into the round of 12. But he just kept YOLO stimming his entire army into defensive positions for Ryung, and Ryung kind of recognized it. There was even up until I think the very last fight, there was a point where if Ryung had moved positions and Time had jumped on him, Time could have still turned that game around and taken the series and would have ultimately taken that spot that Ryung was able to get. But Ryung kind of recognized that Time was playing with this weird urgency, and Ryung, being the patient older player that he was just like, okay, well, I'm just gonna sit here behind my shield wall and let you run into these spears. And he did it over and over and over again, and threw one of the biggest leads you can have in a TVT while the game is still in flux, Yeah,
I mean, look at what we got right here. Ryung, it was game 3, was the Berlingrad you're talking about. You're 15 minutes in. Ryung has some money, sure, because he's remaxing, but it's 4 bases to 6. And it got even worse. I think it was 4 bases to 7 at one point. That is not a game that you should ever lose. But as you said, misplaced urgency definitely made a difference. But even then, Steadfast, Ryung does not get out of Group B unless Special wins the only maps, or the only series that he plays that he actually wins. He does end up winning one map against Showtime earlier on, but he didn't win a single series until he turns it on in 2-0's time to ensure Ryung qualifies.
Yeah, it was crazy. Special showed up with the power of friendship and the power of ruining the 4th place player's situation. That happens twice in this tournament, where a player who's already eliminated ruins another player. And it specifically happened to Protoss twice. So that's something that we have to talk about as well when we're going to be talking about, Protoss underperforming, is they got absolutely screwed over by players that were already eliminated from the tournament in matches that on paper you would favor the other player. It's super weird. Well, I guess actually it happened. It was Time not doing it for himself, but even still, I know that Showtime, I think if he had not dropped the map to Ryung in their series, he would have advanced over Ryung. It came down right down to the wire. It was extremely close.
No, it really did. And it also meant, though, that because Ryung didn't know he qualified until after he had already lost to Dark, we got the fun, we got the reaction GIF, which unfortunately I don't have prepared, of him kind of realizing what's happening and just straight up, massively emoting at the screen. But also, we got the my mind is Maru, or my body is Ryung, my soul is Maru interview, which was perhaps one of the greatest things we had there, Nish.
Yeah, man, that was awesome. Was that the on the ground segment that you did?
Yes.
Was that part of that? Yeah, man. Kudos to you on that, man. That was one of the best things that I've seen in such a long time in terms of StarCraft streams in general. We've been so isolated and at home for so long. One, everybody's finally back at an event, and then two, you come up with this idea of like this on the ground view to capture these moments, and that was one of those. And seeing that was just like so joyful, and it was just like it feels great to be back, man. Yeah, dude, it was one of those sick moments that you happen to catch. Imagine if you didn't do that, dude.
Yeah, well,
But
it did make sense, but also, moving on a little bit, Steadfast. I feel like you want to talk about Group C. You've been talking about the absolute sadness that have been players getting knocked out by eliminated players. Talk to us about Group C.
Well, we had a really unexpected situation where Trap Zest were in this one, and we were kind of counting on Zest to be the Protoss hope after what had happened in the round of 36 and what had happened in Group A and Group B. Trap had been slumping. He has been slumping for the past, 6 months plus, considering the fact that many players and many fans thought that he was the best player in the world leading up to, well, that previous point. And so everyone was kind of counting on Zest to really turn it on. And he had himself a rough group. He ended up losing a kind of a close, weird PvP with Trap in the first round. And then Hero Marine came more prepared than we have ever seen him, which is saying a lot because he's been looking very good over the last, same thing, 6 months to a year. He's been on a really, really steady rise. And he had some of the coolest builds you'll ever see. And he just absolutely came in and cleaned Zest up. And then right out of the gate, you're like, okay, Zest is in some big trouble in this group. But then, he settles down 2-0 Estrella. You're like, okay, good. We're the runner-up of IEM Katowice 2022 is still in this tournament. We're okay.
Like, we can do
this.
Or
no, yeah, no,
2020 and 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that it was already a foregone conclusion, basically, going into the tournament. And then he comes in and, destroys Bunny, who's at the top of the group. So you're like, okay, this is good. Like, we're chilling. And then he wins game 1 versus Lambo in pretty decisive fashion. And you're like, all right, cool. He's got his fate. Actually, at this point, we thought he was eliminated, but there was a scenario where if he 2-0'd Lambo, he was actually through. But I thought he was eliminated at this point, but I wasn't counting on Estrella 2-1ing Trap. But basically, the math got really weird. And then he did the world's dumbest build in game number 2. It was like a DT charge lot all in. And we don't know why he did it. And it still almost worked. Like, Lambo almost got killed by it. But Lambo managed to hold. He managed to rally. He won that and then won the series. And we would learn, basically later that would mathematically eliminate Zest from the tournament. And it's like, Zest, what are you doing, man? But also, holy crap, Lambo, who had the roughest tournament so far, and then at the very end ends Zest's career. And they were joking during that the on the floor interview that he put him into retirement.
Yeah, because you got to remember, this is most likely Zest's last tournament. We don't know. We've been saying X tournament is Zest's last tournament for 18 months now, give or take. This is certainly, at least according to Trap's last international tournament. He might play in GSL for a little bit longer, but apparently military is calling, which is really bad news for Protoss in Korea. But we also kind of saw a mirror image of this almost exact group last year. It was, instead of Hero Marine and Lambo, anyway, we had a very similar group last year. Zest, Trap, Estrella, and I want to say Hero Marine were there last year. And we almost had a rehash. Estrella, he doesn't beat Zest this year, unlike last year, but he is one series away from advancing once again. And it's someone he probably should have beaten. And that he was 1-1 on Bunny. He was looking very good against Bunny, and then Bunny, instead of falling to Estrella, Bunny tops the group.
Yeah. Bunny looked really good. Bunny looked insanely good. And even later on in the group stage, or in the bracket stage, I actually thought he had a really solid chance versus Rogue. It's so brutal because if a scoreline is anything less than a 3-2, people just write it off as being a one-sided series. And this one was not, like, especially Blackburn was such a close match. Like it was insanely close, and Rogue really had to turn it on in order to compete and, well, take down Bunny. But Rogue's not that used to being dressed and pressured that heavily that early in a bracket, so it was a really great showing from Bunny and a really great tournament from him. But yeah.
Yeah, going back to what you're saying, that Bunny Rogue match too. You know, when he finally took a game off of Rogue, he was like, okay, I think I'm back into this. But Rogue had such a good read on him, and you know, it was 3-1. So yeah, I rewatched those games, and yeah, dude, you can tell like Bunny was a little frustrated too. And at one point, he's just like, okay, I gotta do this. But yeah, man, that was an incredible match too. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, well, certainly, you know, the story. Bunny, actually, the crazy thing about Group C, by the way, is Bunny, we're in the final. He's top of his group. He's 4-0 or 3-0 before he loses to, I want to say, Hero Marine.
Zest.
There we go. He's 3-0, like, wow, top of his group, but he drops a map every single time. And you would think someone sitting there at the top of the group, 3-0, 3-1, something like that, is kind of guaranteed top slot, just for how well he was doing. But it was a matter of he had to win every single series that he won in order to hit top slot. If you look at the map setup, Hero Marine had more map wins. It was looking that if Hero Marine won that series that he lost against Bunny, well, actually at the end, yeah, it was Bunny versus Hero Marine to determine top billing. So Bunny, again, it was a matter of, wow, is he actually going to qualify? Is he actually going to make it out? I don't know. He's got a good series record, but his map record is pretty terrible. And then, Nish, Steadfast, Group D happened. It was the group of death. And honestly, it kind of felt slightly less deathy than I expected it to be.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, the only time I felt that way was when I saw Rainer and Maru, dude. You know, those games were just insane. And it's like what Rainer was saying in the post-interview matches where, like, Maru just doesn't know when to die. So that's the only time I got that feeling. But other than that, like, other results, I wasn't a little too surprised. But yeah, dude, I think one of my favorite matches during the Group D, Rainer Maru, definitely, man. Those were top-tier TVZ right there, man.
Yeah, Steadfast?
Yeah, no, I do think that it was, considering how much talent and how stacked it was a little bit not disappointing, because there were some matches that really, really freaking delivered, but it didn't really ever feel like the group was in flux that much. I think it came down to the wire at the very end with, you know, Joun and Bian and Clem, and even Maru a little bit, but even then he still was, you know, fine. But I think probably the best game of that entire group was actually Scarlet versus Clem, game 2 on Hardwire. That one came down to, like, literally they were fighting over a base for like 6 minutes. And Scarlet had like 4 Broodlords left that she was trying to save. Clem kept EMPing her infestors. Like, it was insanely close. It was a 40-minute slugfest. And up until that point, Clem had not won a map yet. But with that win, he actually gave himself a chance to make it out of the group. And if he had beaten Bian at the very end, I think he needed Joan to lose. But if he had beaten Bian 2-0, actually, what would have happened if he'd finished 2-0? Because he beat Joan.
If Joun won, Joun was always going to qualify. Best Clem could do would be to go to +1 map score. And so there was no comparison. As long as Joun won, he was through. But so that was such a Group D. You talk about, there were some really good, there were some incredible games. But on the flip side, it felt like the top line games were always really good. And then you get to map 2, there are a lot of 2-0s in this group. So, for example, Rainer Joun, actually, we ended up casting that, was awesome. Joun looked genuinely like he would go and knock down Rainer, which would have been insane. But Bian stomped Scarlet, Maru stomped Clem. You know, Clem versus Rainer, same idea. Which is not exactly what you expect out of a group of death. You expect every single series to be played to be, or most of them, to be hotly contested. But even still, you talk about the storylines of Protoss underperforming. There was one Protoss, we've said his name a lot, that absolutely did not underperform. In fact, I think he massively overperformed compared to where I had him going into this tournament, especially by beating Maru in the final series. His name is Jo-un, and that last series against Maru was insanely impressive.
Yeah, he looked really good. He was like, I've talked about this a few times, but many of the Korean players considered him to be the best Protoss player in the world for, I want to say, like a few months at the very least. And you know, it always goes back and forth because there's a lot of recency bias and all that jazz. But it was really, really good. It was very, very impressive how well he really did. Like he showed up, and you know, things break a little bit differently in that group, and he is in first place in that group, and it's not such a bad thing. Like if he beats Raynor 2-0 or 2-1, well, actually, I don't think he could have. Yeah, no, he couldn't have 2-0. But if he wins that 1-2-1, things get very, very messy in that group, and maybe well, no, I think Raynor's map score was too good. But regardless, things get different, and maybe it changes up the bracket. Even if he just ends up differently, and you swap here Maru and Jo-un spots, things end up very different.
Yeah, I think then it's probably Maru in the round well, Maru still moved on, but then I think it's Maru versus Stolar, and we would get a rehash of last series or of last year with maybe not with the nukes, but that is definitely kind of a grudge match right there. Not that I'm complaining, because Hero Marine Solar was an incredible series. But then we move on to the bracket stage, right? We had, at the end of things, we had 4 players get out: Solar, Serral, Bunny, Raynor, 3 Zergs, 1 Terran. Move on directly to the round of 8. And then a lot of things were a little bit more hotly contested. Rogue, Dark, Hero Marine, Dream, Ryung, Trap, Maru, Jo-un. It was a lot closer in the round of 12. And I said the round of 36 was like the greatest day of StarCraft we ever had. The round of 12 plus round of 8, the Dark Trap series accepted, was certainly held a challenge to that moniker.
Yeah, I mean, first things first, we do have to talk about Dark Trap. Dark Trap didn't look even competitive. He looked so badly outclassed. It was not a fun series to even watch. Like, we had Trap forcing the base to be taken at the 3rd, and then Cannon rushing a natural where there's no hatchery down there, and then he loses this big Artosis pylon and loses the Stargate when he's going for this it was a really, really one-sided series. And then finally, when we had Trap play standard, Dark just busted out this crazy build and just killed the crap out of him. But every other match in the round of 12 was very enjoyable. Even Rogue versus Ryung, which we were looking at, and we were saying, like, oh man, I really wish Ryung had gotten any other draw. I wish he could have gotten a TVT, because you and I were super excited about Ryung's run. We had really, we had really come to love this Cinderella run of his, and even he made it look better than Dark and Trap. Like, Dark and Trap was just, it was a massacre.
Yeah. But as you said, the rest of the setup, the rest of the series were actually really cool. When you talk about how if it's not a 3-2, you're like, okay, well, it was kind of a stomp. Well, the Hero Marine Jo-un series was a good example of why that is absolutely not true. Massive engage, like, it's crazy. I went into this talking about how good it must be for the Terrans to be offline, because I feel like the Terran micro is more instantaneous, so it's something where they're going to respond to having an offline setup, having it be better for them. And it felt like we kind of saw that from players like Ryung and Hero Marine more than anything else. The engagements that some of these Terran players were able to take compared to what we're used to seeing in online events was just next level.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you, dude, because, being offline and finally back for the first time in front of a live audience, and then seeing how well Terrans were performing, I was surprised, especially as a Terran player. I was expecting like more Protosses than Terrans at this point, or at least like one Terran. But dude, it was just absolutely incredible performance from like all these different players from Hero, especially Hero Marine. Dude, seeing him play, I was just like, wow, dude, like this guy just like turned it up like to 11, and seeing him play was just awesome, man. Like I can't get over like how incredible it was. I know I'm just like saying all these like buzzwords, but it was that exciting to be watching this on screen.
Yeah, and Steadfast, while we didn't necessarily see it as much from the Hero Marine series, PvT, TvP in this tournament was really defined by that Ryung build, the 6-minute stim idea, more so than anything else, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting approach because you forego harassment, and it's really, really, it feels really weak, or it feels like it would be really weak against 4-gate Blink Stalker or any very early Blink Stalker play. But that was not really what we've been seeing a lot of in the like. It's funny because we saw so much of it for most of this year, this past like 12 months. And in the past maybe 3 months, we've barely seen it at all at the pro level. The prevailing build that we thought was going to be the defining build of the tournament was going to be that Stargate opener into the single Oracle into very quick 3-gate Blink Stalker as a follow-up. And the beauty of that is that it allows you to get charge up in time for the 7-minute timing push that is so common from Terrans these days. And it allows you to have blink up against any, non-stim, non-combat shields, marine tank pushes. So you can just kite them on the map. But against a very quick stim itself, it's a little bit trickier to kind of make that defense happen. And yeah, you give up that harass, and it ended up being this insanely powerful 6-minute stim combat shields push timing. It won Ryung so many matches in the round of 36, and Protosses were just not prepared for it.
Yeah. And we saw other Terran play. I mean, we talked about this series. The Ryung, or excuse me, the Hero Marine Joun series was just a series of Hero Marine doing Hero Marine pushes and hitting at weird timings and winning the game. But we saw him and every Terran, when they played a Protoss in the round of 24, adapt that style as well. And it really, I think I saw Showtime beat it once. And I think that was the only Protoss player I saw beat the build over the course of the entire tournament. Which I may be misremembering something, but that dominated. You want to talk about, oh, well, it's Zerg is too strong against Protoss. I mean, Tale of the Tape says Terrans knocked out like every single Protoss in the tournament. I guess Dark knocking out Trap, but I can't say that was unexpected considering relative form. But Steadfast, you talked about this Dream Maru series as this could have been so much different. Tell me about it.
Well, they fought themselves a pretty tight battle. It was, I think, the big turning point, because Dream basically showed that he was capable of going toe-to-toe with Maru in the late game in TvT, which is a really impressive feat because Maru's late game TvT is insane. It's legendary. He specifically, in some cases, will not handicap himself, but he will aim for the late game because he's so confident in it. And Dream, in one of these matches, shows that he is capable of going toe-to-toe, and he beats him in game number 2. And then in game 3, he actually has Maru, I would say even more so than in game 2, he has Maru completely outclassed in that clash. And he actually has him dead to rights. Like, he is pushing into the natural expansion of Maru. He's knocked out a bunch of exterior bases. He's got the Viking lead. He's got this huge advantage. And then the only thing that I can think of is that he absolutely panics, like just completely, his hands just stop working or his brain switches off something. But he runs all of his Vikings and Ravens, as well as his whole army, into the main base of Maru. And the funny thing is, like, he loses all of his ground army, and that actually would have been okay. Like, it would have been okay. But he leaves his Vikings and Ravens just sitting over top of Simmed Marines for like a couple seconds, and it loses him such a massive advantage. Even after that happens, he still makes a game of it. But that was absolutely the turning point of the series. And if Dream doesn't make that mistake, he goes up 2-1 over Maru. And even game 3, Maru was making all these maneuvers. And then same thing, Dream suddenly strikes back. And it feels like things are going pretty well for him. It was such an unfortunate situation for Dream, because this felt like it could have been his kind of his coming out party, so to speak, like his like, I'm here, like, deal with me, look at everyone who is standing tall, but I'm still going to be the one who stands tallest. And then, you know, he has this one very unfortunate choke moment, and it just loses him the freaking tournament. Like it gets him basically eliminated at that point. It was a really unfortunate situation.
Yeah, but it did give us some good games. There's a reason that when people talk about Maru, there's a homily of Maru. If he's behind, he's even. If he's even, he's ahead. If he's ahead, well, good night, good luck. It's not going to work again. But really, Dream really almost returning to his SSL form back in the day prior to military. And we've had inklings that maybe he's back to that level, but certainly nothing like this. Now, it wasn't much of a surprise that we saw Cyril knock out Maru. I thought it was going to be more hotly contested. I thought Maru was going to win, but not the craziest thing. But man, if Dream had knocked out Maru, that would be a very different story. Although, would that have been really surprising? It would have been another offline event where something crazy happens and we're denied the Cyril Maru series that we have been dreaming of for years. Like, it happened in every single Katowice. What was it, 2019? They were lined up in the finals, and then Zest kills Cyril with the Adept printer build, and then Maru dies as well. So, you know, I don't know if it would have been that surprising, but certainly something. Then we talk about Rogue Ryung, and as bad as that was a 3-1 kind of stompy. We saw some really cool ideas from Ryung in that series. Right, Steadfast?
Yeah, we had the proxy barracks in the natural, which is the one map that he did win. We had a pretty cool build on Berlingrad that I believe he did one to Cyril.
Yes,
in
and
the group
Dark,
stages,
I believe.
And okay, yeah, and he actually made it like he really made Cyril work for it, which is something not a lot of players can say. Like it's very difficult to make Cyril have to earn a victory. Like it feels uncommon, but it was so telling how good Rogue really is, because even in the situation where on 2K Atmos, where he had lost his natural, there was no counter damage that came in, it was just a gigantic lead for Ryung, Rogue still made it look so close. Every single engagement looked close, and I kept looking at the supply and being like, okay, like Rogue's dead, like it's
No
fine,
way.
don't worry,
Yeah.
Ryung's got this. Yeah, no, he's fine, he's up 40 supply. But like he kept managing everything and giving himself ways to win. And even up until there was two sets of burrowed banelings, that if they'd connected, the game is suddenly even again. And it really threw into sharp relief how freaking good Rogue is at this game. And then, you know, that just shows how good the players that beat him are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like on the flip side, though, I feel like we give Ryung's builds to, say, Maru, or, I don't know, Hero Marine, something like that. I think that this is a different series. The idea is the build orders that Ryung was using. Sure, maybe Ryung showed the 2-base stim timing too often. He showed it against Cyril and Dark and didn't win a single map with it. It did look the best we ever saw it against Rogue. And for a moment, it looked like maybe Rogue was going to be able to make something happen. Of course, Ryung didn't. He did lose that series 3-1. But, man, throw those builds into a player that maybe has more mechanics, that is just seen as better. Maybe Rogue does knock out in the round of 12. And certainly we did see the aura of Rogue never losing in a bracket in a best of 5 or more. That got shattered a little bit later after Maru broke it late last year. But the next thing we need to talk about, you talk about good series and good Zergs. Raynor versus Dark. I was going to say it was the greatest ZVZ I've ever seen, and then we had that finals, but still, that was an incredible ZVZ. Right,
Yeah.
Nish?
Yeah, man. It was one of those like TBT moments where like, everything comes down to the wire where you're fighting over resources. And what was incredible to see was how Dark played on Raynor's playstyle, because he's very aggressive, right? And when Raynor wants to kill you, he'll go in for the kill. And Dark was kind of taking advantage of that, because what was happening was, Raynor was building up his army, right, and charging in with everything he got, but Dark manages to defend, and he's still alive. And while that's happening, Raynor's running out of all these resources, so you're kind of like getting into the state where like, okay, if I just chill and he throws his army at me, I'll be fine, because he won't have any more resources. And that's pretty much what happened. And yeah, dude, it was constantly back and forth, and eventually Raynor kind of realized that in the end, like, you know what, I just got to trade efficiently, just be patient, and I'll make it through this. And sure enough, he did, man.
I mean, I think I was talking to Steadfast on Discord while this was happening, and the fact that we had so many games, say game 3 that we have right here, where Dark all-ins Raynor, he does not kill him, and from that point you're saying, okay, well, Raynor should be ahead, he's up in workers, he's up in tech, it should be fine, and he still drags the game to 30 minutes and wins the game. Dark was really starting to feel like a Zerg version of Maru, where it doesn't matter how far behind he is at 10 minutes, because he's going to win in 30 anyways. So especially with that, the fact that Raynor was able to settle it down and say, okay, Dark, I'm just going to play your game and win game 5. I think I said to Steadfast afterwards, I was like, there's no way that Raynor doesn't win Katowice again this year, right? With that like strength of mentality on top of the mechanical skill. And he did take Cyril to 7 games, so I guess it's partially fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's so demoralizing as a player to have a situation like what happened in games 2 and 3 happen to Raynor, because you hold it all in, that when you hold that, you are supposed to win the game. You are supposed to always win that game when you hold the all-ins that your opponent did. It's just how ZVZ works. It's how StarCraft is supposed to inherently work. And you have this situation where he's not able to win the game off of it. And not only is he not able to win the game off of it, he ends up losing the game in the most brutal and painfully exhausting way possible, where you're just bashing your head into this wall. And over and over again, you feel like you're about to break the wall, but you like look down and you're like, man, there's like a lot of blood on the floor and it's all mine. And eventually you just kind of pass out from the blood loss. And then sure enough, it happens to you again. And you're just like, well, okay then. But for him to have turned it around and did what he did in game 5 after how games 2 and 3 went, it was very, very impressive.
Yeah.
It was crazy looking at the resources loss differential in those earlier games. I think at one point, Raynor had lost literally, and I think this was game 2, had lost literally a base's worth more of gas than Dark had. It was like 12,000 gas, 15,000 gas, something like that, that he had lost more than. You're not winning a mirror matchup game. You're not winning a ZVZ if that happens. So intensely demoralizing, but also maybe good practice for that grand finals. And it was, again, really cool to see Raynor with the strength of will to take it to Dark in that 5th game and take it in. And then you talk about the next series. I mean, Steadfast, I feel like Solar Here Marine, there are so many stories of this tournament. Rogues run, Spirits run, but Here Marine in that quarterfinals, taking down Solar to move on to the semis where he almost beats Raynor. I feel like that's the story of the tournament, but I keep saying that about a bunch of other stories too.
I mean, there were so many stories in this tournament. I do agree that the one that we saw the most fleshed out and that actually was truly the story of this tournament is in fact Raynor's run, Hero Marine's run, because it was something that was pretty unexpected, not insanely so. Everyone who's been watching him in the weekly cups, just generally speaking, knows that he has really, really improved a lot and that he's looked insanely good for a while. But it's it's such a different story to do it at the World Championships. Like such an insanely different story. So for him to show up and actually do it and have like some insane builds that he busted out against Zest, specifically that series versus Solar, where Solar was playing very, very well, and it kind of felt like Hero Marine was a little bit down and out until I want to say until game 2, when he just he kept rallying in, and he just managed to somehow break his opponent. It was a very different and retooled Hero Marine, and it was a really exciting Hero Marine that we got to see. And he was so dialed in, and he came really prepared with the knowledge of what it takes to win games at that level.
Yeah, the interesting thing actually is here you talk about every Monday. We got that great quote from his signature series where he's like, "Oh yeah, it's Monday." Every day is Monday. He lost the title of most EPT Cups won to Zest 3 weeks before Katowice. So he has not been quite as dominant over the last 6 months in these weeklies as he had otherwise. But he had also been, and I think Steadfast, you and I cast a series where he did this. He has been showing a lot more variability in his play. It's not just the system Terran anymore. It is him pulling out all of these funky builds, the weird timing pushes. So it's not just, oh, I'm playing innovation. He's going to do his thing and I'm going to beat it or I'm not, which is a really big deal. And it meant that he went up 2-0 on Raynor, which was beating Solar. Okay, unexpected, but fine. Going up 2-0 on Raynor was probably, there was a very real opportunity where he goes and he beats Raynor and moves into the finals. But this was actually such a cool moment in Hero Marine Solar where the game is not decided, but just the high ground, low ground elevator play to start slowly killing the buildings. And you can see Solar, he's like, I have the army to beat this, but I can just never engage into it, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was what one of the moments where you had to be careful of how many units you're going to lose and positioning, and it was in this weird base trade scenario too, and it had you on the edge of your seat your whole time. The thing that I loved about this match was in the main when Hero Marine got into that pocket because of what was it the Bailing Nest and I think it was an Evo Chamber or something, or the spawning pool. Once he landed in that pocket and was able to pick off his units, I was like, okay, he's got this.
It was really cool. It was a super special moment, and especially considering in that game things had really been going off the rails for Hero Marine for quite a while. He was struggling. He was struggling against the big run bys from Solar, and it was kind of feeling like the game was getting out of control for him. And then he just made that. He's like, okay, well, I have one win condition right now. It's to win with a big push. And if I don't, I'm dead. And if I do, then, cool, I'm going into the next game with a 2-1 lead. And he made the right call, and he really got rewarded for it. Even game number 4 had a really cool moment in it where Hero Marine had basically won the game. And then he did such an unfortunate thing where all of his tanks basically got caught unsieged and unprepared. And he ends up losing 15 tanks, and Solar, it was going to be a 3-run. It was going to be a 3-1 almost 100%. Solar had lost all of his mining bases. He had an army that could definitely fight his opponents, but it wasn't well set up to fight into a sieged Terran. And unfortunately for Hero Marine, he got caught with most of his bios separated from his tanks, and the tanks all caught unsieged. But there was just so many moments where a single misstep from either player completely changed the tide of the game. And that's what makes a beautiful game of StarCraft is the ability for you to be behind for a very long period of time, but with the right patience and picking your spot, able to turn it around and exploiting a mistake from your opponent. That is what makes such insanely good world-class games at the World Championships. And it was just really awesome to see.
Yeah, and then luckily Hero Marine was able to clutch it through, take it to game number 5 after really winning game number 4. I think we can call this a 4-1 as much as it was a 3-2. But the other prevailing story of this entire tournament was the fact that players did not want to lose. And I know that might be an obvious statement, but there's not wanting to lose, and then there is giving literally every possible thing in your entire arsenal to make sure that if there is a 2% chance of winning this game, you're 1%, half a percent chance to win this game, you are going to win it. And that was the story of pretty much the entirety of the round of 12. That was the story of half of the quarterfinals. And then we get into Maru Sero, which was this god matchup, right? We saw most of us saw King of Battles 2, that insane 6-game series. And then Sero just kind of says, hi, I'm actually really good. Watch me bot Maru.
No, you're true. That's true, man. Because the moments leading up to that match, social media was going crazy. Everybody on Twitter was just like, everyone get in now. Sarah and Maru fighting, and that's kind of like the mentality I went into. And then Sarah just bops them, dude, and I was just like, this guy's just unstoppable, man.
It really was.
It was like, even the match that Maru won, like even the map, which by the way was the first map loss that Sarah had suffered in the entire tournament. This felt like when we used to be excited for foreign players to go up against top Koreans, and we were like on this copium being like, oh man, they're gonna do it, like, oh, it's gonna be a close match. And then it would be, you know, your Marus or your Darks or whatever just coming in and being like, you idiot, did you think this was gonna be a close match? What's wrong with you, you moron? How dumb are you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm so dumb for having hope. Ha ha.
I will say though,
that's kind of what it felt like between Maru and Cyril, but like from the other direction.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, man. That's a good point, dude.
Man, I was so happy that everyone's been making much of Dark's or Maru's mech about how he's so good at it, how if you get in the late game, he's unbreakable. I was very glad that we got to see one game in this tournament where Maru actually got there in a safe way. Rainer Maru was insane, but he did not get into the way he wanted to be quick enough, right? Rainer killed him and Maru made it work for 20 minutes, but he still died. That game 3 gave us a little bit of hope. And then Maru says, actually, I'm going to play Bio, and Cyril rolls him again. I do think it was actually interesting. We talked about, wow, offline Terran. It felt like the Zergs, for the most part, they benefited from the offline effect more so than anyone else. Maybe that's just me applying a storyline to results rather than letting the results speak for themselves. But that was, again, somewhat unexpected. I did have Maru as my odds-on whatever odds you want to give him 1-to-1 favorite to win the tournament. So getting smashed by Cyril, a big surprise. I'll tell you though, what was also a surprise was this Bunny Rogue series, which while it was a 3-to-1, was pretty hotly contested. Steadfast.
Well, to go back to your point, I actually think it was Cyril who specifically got the offline buff more than any other player. Offline Cyril is a different beast, and we got to see why at this tournament. Like he had to remind us. So many people were like, "No, he's not that good," you know, like, "Oh, Cyril's washed up," and it's like, well, no, he just hasn't won every tournament. He's only getting to the round of 8 and round of 4 and grand finals of the last, 85% of the tournaments he's played. So sorry that your recency bias is for some reason discounting a player who has been one of the highest performers of all time. Like, I don't understand where you're coming from with this. But he showed us, like, no, I am still the greatest player at this tournament. Like, don't disrespect me. And he shows us why. But yeah, Bunny Rogue was very cool because it felt like Bunny was actually able to go toe to toe with Rogue in a way that I didn't expect him to be able to. And that's not to say that I don't think he's a very good player. He's obviously a very good player. I actually had Bunny. Exactly, he topped his group. I had Bunny as like the outstanding Terran like 3 or 4 years ago to be like, oh, I'm like, okay, this is the next great Terran. Like, he looked really good, and then he ended up getting like bopped by Dark in a tournament, and I was like, okay, I'll crawl back into my hole. But even then, the games, like, he looked good. It just was kind of funky. Like, it felt like he got countered stylistically. Mm-hmm. But Rogue like really had to work for this one. He did not get anything easy in this tournament or in this match, despite in many situations having almost build order wins. He still had to really grind it out, especially that game number 3
Yeah.
on Blackburn. Yeah. He like really had to earn it. And I don't think anyone was expecting that.
No, definitely not. Bunny, yeah. Taking map off Maru in the bracket stage, always a big surprise. But, well, I guess we can talk about that in a second. But let's move on to the semis because we're talking about storylines. I don't know that there's a better storyline. And first and foremost, I am so glad that Raynor got to carry the trophy in. You know, he wins this offline World Finals, but he actually gets to hold the trophy in front of a crowd, which is it's very awesome. I don't know, that warms the cockles of my cold dead heart. But you talk about storylines. We had a Raynor who has been looking very good. He tops the group of death. He beats Maru, pushed to his absolute limits by Hero Marine. I did not have that. Oh, actually, I have this. I did not have that on my setup. I did not have that as any way, shape, or form expectations for the. I thought this was going to be 3-0 Raynor into the finals.
Yeah, man. I mean, I didn't expect even Clem to be knocked out early on. Like, I was expecting Clem to be here in the semifinal, you know? But for Hero Marine to be here, it was just like, what the? And like I said, he turned it up, dude, and he earned it. Like, he made it to the spot. And seeing this 3-2 Raynor Hero Marine result, absolutely incredible, dude. Like, I wasn't expecting that. Like, that was not on my bingo card. I don't think that was on anybody's bingo card. And, dude, he freaking did it. Steadfast?
Yeah, no, and he was so close to being in the grand finals, which is the like ridiculously close. Like he to that point basically was I got a thing that's stuck in my foot right now. He was basically in the grand finals in terms of results. Like I really don't think that anyone, just to echo your point, anyone could have predicted it. Anyone who had it on their bingo card is realistically, they're probably lying because, you know, no one actually predicted that at all. And there's a lot of Hero Marine fans and a lot of Hero Marine believers, but especially after how close it was versus Solar and how good Raynor was looking, everyone has to have been like, no, there's no way. Like, yeah, it was a great run, but it's over now. And then all of a sudden he's up 2-0 and he's pushing Raynor to the limit on the third map. And you're like, oh, what is happening right now? And then Raynor's like, no. I really want this tournament win. I would like to be the world champion again, please. And he denies Hero Marine from getting into the finals, but it was an extremely close series, like extremely close.
Yeah, and I think that the coolest part about the Steadfast was we saw some quote-unquote outmoded styles coming from Hero Marine. 8 racks doesn't feel like it's all that great anymore at the highest level. It feels like Zergs, for the most part, have figured it out. In the game, too, certainly Hero Marine, he went for that 8 racks. It worked out, that 2-2 timing. All these things that you don't expect to see Terrans win the game with. Well, apparently if you're Hero Marine, you just got to be really big. And then you end up winning that. On the flip side, though, Rogue versus Cyril was just a great marker of how good Cyril is. Because maybe outside of that first game, it wasn't close. It was not close at all.
No. And it's so funny to know that recently when they played, Rogue had bopped Cyril. It's like you wouldn't believe it having watched those games. You'd be like, no, that has to have been a different player. You have to have gotten some names mixed up. And it's like, well, no, he actually beat him in 2 series in a row and kind of made him look not silly, but a little bit silly at the same time. And it just means that Cyril really wanted this tournament. He did not want to have people talking about that anymore. He wanted people to STFU after what happened at TSL 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude. The 3-0 result was just like, man, this guy's just reading him, and especially right here, like on Blackburn, when I think he just like expected him to take the gold. I mean, naturally every Zerg takes the gold, but yeah, dude, he just steamrolled Rogue, man.
Yeah, and I know part of it was honestly the gold based build from Rogue was not good. Rogue has good builds. His gold based builds were not incredible, but even still, you don't expect the third base to go down here in game 3, for example. Those mostly it's been dealt with. Baneling defense is fine. So with all these great ZVZs we had in the tournament, we just had Cheryl with an extreme display of dominance. But I guess the other way to look at this is you had two players who were looking really good, because Raynor, despite losing 2 maps to Hero Marine, he looked really good the entire bracket stage, leading up to one of the best mirror matchup grand final. I'd say one of the best grand finals we've had in quite a while, but certainly one of the best mirror matchup grand finals we've had.
Yeah, definitely agree, man. Right out the gate, like I felt like Sarah was throwing these builds that Raynor wasn't expecting, especially in game 2 with the the spine crawlers. Because these are players that have like trained together, they've played together, so they know each other really well. And I think that's kind of like Sarah's technique in the beginning was like, I'm not gonna do what you think I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna take an entirely different approach. And it was great seeing that series too. Like, he was playing super aggressive from what I saw, and not like this defensive Zerg type of player like he usually did in the past that I would see, and kind of like would respond to his opponent. No, it was an entirely different Serral, dude, and it was one of the greatest ZVZs that I've seen, and I look forward to every ZVZ, but this one was just absolutely different, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I
just agreed. Yeah.
Okay. And Steadfast, I mean, looking at this series, it's felt like Raynor has almost always had Cyril's number. And that was such a cool citizen's arrest right there, preventing the spine from landing. But it's felt like Raynor has always had Cyril's number. We've had a lot of Raynor Cyril ZVZ Grand Finals in DreamHack Masters over the last 12, 18 months. And every time it just felt the mind games went so hard towards the Italian that even if mechanically it was fine, it was just Cyril's good at ZVZ. He's not good at Raynor versus Cyril. And then when Raynor started to come back in this series after Cyril goes up 2-0, I was certainly thinking, oh God, is he doing it again? Have the mind games swapped? But somehow Cyril, he figured it out.
Yeah, it was this entire series was kind of like a set of storylines, because it was a bit of a microcosm of their entire duel throughout history, where initially Cyril was just the better player overall, and wasn't all that noteworthy because Cyril was just better. He was just able to defeat Raynor. And then for a while, like you said, Raynor really was the Achilles heel of Cyril and the only one who could beat him at a lot of these tournaments. And then Cyril figures something out, and in the last few times that they've met, it hasn't been Cyril dominated, but it's definitely been Cyril having the, I would say, slight advantage. And it's cool that it's kind of a bit of a microcosm of their ongoing duel that we see. And it's also cool that was the grand finals from that storyline perspective, because they are just damn good players, and it's ridiculous.
This was the first World Championships we've had where it is foreigner versus foreigner, not foreigner versus Korean. This is the first time that's ever happened. And the other story, I mean, they were just, again, you're talking about so many stories. Raynor had match point against him in every matchup of the finals, every matchup of the playoffs. He went down 2-1 to Dark. He went down 2-0 to Hero Marine, and he made it work against both players. So when we see him go down 0-2 and start to make the comeback happen, I was very convinced that this was going to be a 4-2 until we started to see there's later games. And in Raynor's defense, he went up 3-2. He would have won a best of 5. But there's a reason we don't play best of 5s in the grand finals. We play best of 7s. But you talk about mind games, misreads. This game on Hardwire, Cyril being convinced to go Corruptors with all of this, that was when things started to get a little bit scary, I think, at least for Cyril fans.
Corruptor versus Muta is such a weird scenario because in theory, the Muta player should always win. In theory. But it's so tricky to navigate from both sides because the Corruptors, they have just so much armor, right? Like they're just such good, beefy, tanky units. But the Mutas have that regeneration. So if the Mutas are able to kind of stay on top of it and find... If the Corruptors always target fire, they can do very well. But if they don't, they end up getting kind of embarrassed, and it's kind of this very weird scenario. So it's a really, really highly mechanically demanding style for both players, but in different ways. And I think you're right. After this game, this is definitely a moment where you're like, oh, the big mechanical skill check went in the favor of Raynor. Even if barely slightly, and even if on paper it should ever so slightly go in his favor, it's still a situation where you can start to sweat as a Cyril fan for sure. He's lost 2 games in a row. He lost the big quote unquote earmark of mechanical skill. It's understandable to be getting a little sweaty after that one.
Yeah, honestly, the thing that was worrying the most to me was not the mechanical skill check, although that is important. It was much more, it feels like so many of these finals that we see Cyril and Raynor play, it's predicated on Raynor just being a step ahead mentally in terms of his build orders and his understanding of the games. So the fact that that didn't happen, and the fact that that was what had me really scared, because Raynor just felt he downloaded Cyril finally, and it's okay, Cyril's always going to be reacting wrong from here on out. But that wasn't quite true. Even if Glittering Ashes, probably this game was maybe the game of that grand finals. We had the really cool double lurker den lurker transition that barely finishes with the Corruptors.
Yeah.
I mean, that was within 1 second, I think, of Raynor losing that game.
Yeah, and you can hear the crowd lose their mind over that too. Like that was I think one of the key moments too. Like right here, like dude, it's so close to being destroyed, and then bam, he gets those upgrades just in time, and I think that's what turned everything around. Had he have knocked those out, it would have been an entirely different game. And yeah, dude. Also, shout out to like Zombie Grub and Pig, because like during this whole match too, it felt like a freaking story. Like they were able to suck me into this whole thing, and that moment there, they brought me into it. Like I felt like I was playing against Cyril. It was just that good. And yeah, man, it was just an epic match in Game 3. Or wait, what was this? Sorry. I can't do math right now. But anyways, it was an epic.
Game 6. Game 6.
Game 6.
Yeah.
Or no, that was Game
It was
5.
Game
Yeah,
5.
you're right.
It was Game 5.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, epic match, man.
Yeah, certainly. And then Raynor going up 3-2, we saw Cyril forced to do the thing that he never had to do this entire tournament. That was make a comeback happen. He hadn't dropped a single map until Mario, and he only dropped one to Mario. So that got us into, he did made it happen. And Steadfast, that game 7 was something else.
It was definitely, it was a really good way to like end the tournament. Obviously not entirely. There's the unfortunate thing with the lag that really sucked. But I think it was probably already over at that point anyways. It still does put like a little bit of a damper on it, and people are always going to be like, well, what if Raynor done? No, it was, I don't think you can realistically, in good faith say that actually affected the series, but it definitely felt bad for Raynor. But it was really cool to see after like the first map win and then that third map win from Raynor, him just like popping off and getting so into it, because you're like, oh man, he's feeling himself. He's got this tournament, like he's really coming out swinging. And then no, Cyril's like, no, I haven't won a world championship yet at IEM Katowice. I want it. I want people to respect me. I'm the GOAT, and you're gonna all see it now.
Yeah, what I thought was actually most interesting about that final match, though, we saw Raynor refusing to make the lurker transition. He just stayed on Roach Ravager, which you can do against low numbers of lurkers. But Cyril eventually got to where he needed to be. But I thought that was really interesting because we saw Raynor accept the late game Roach Ravager Lingbane setup, or the not Roach Ravager Lingbane, excuse me, the Hydra Lurker Viper setup against Dark, and he won with it. And he just said, okay, look, I will accept this goes late, and he just refused to make that happen in this final game, which I don't know whether that says something about his comfort in the late game, his comfort against dealing with Cyril, but certainly you're trying to play Roach Ravager into lurkers eventually, and eventually your army just kind of times out.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like over time, you kind of see like Cyril slowly pushing Raynor back to his main, you know, just like bruising his like army over time and just getting ahead essentially. And yeah, man, that's kind of like how I saw it. It was just like Cyril was constantly winning these battles and then just pushing his opponent back slowly and slowly. And then once he's outside of your base, it's like, what can I do? You know? And I think that's at that moment that Raynor was just like, dude, that's it. And then you can even see him on the screen too, like, oh, dude, like, no, this can't be happening. But yeah, man.
And then, yeah, we finally had our champion. Cyril, there's always going to be the question. Artosis is not going to let anyone mention the word GOAT without mentioning Rogue, but Cyril is the... I don't think Rogue has a BlizzCon. I think Cyril's the only player to have both world championships. No, SOS has that, but that was before Katowice, so it was the world championship. So
yeah. SOS has the winner take all tournament. Yeah. No, I think the thing is, like, you're never gonna have it decided. But I think at this point, no one can ever have the GOAT argument without putting Cyril in there. And I've seen a few people online being like, "Well, Cyril shouldn't even be in the discussion," and you're like, man, shut the like, what are you even talking about? Like, the guy has made it to the top 4 of every tournament for like 3 years straight, or like the top 8 of every tournament for 3 years straight. Like, how can you in good faith not put him there? But this has cemented that he will always be, at worst, the top 3. For me, it does make him the GOAT, because everyone looked so insane. Like, I got to really see and feel how good the players were playing.
Oh, yeah.
And the only one who made him look even mortal was Raynor. And I know how well Raynor was playing, and I know how hard he was labbing and practicing, and he made everyone else look silly.
Yeah, remember, this was the Raynor that topped the group of death and won and only lost like 3 maps. Or 2 maps, excuse me. This was a Raynor that was looking terrifying. Although maybe his playoff run was a little bit less impressive than we would have expected. I kind of expected him to storm through. Imagine if Cyril doesn't win this thing, though. Then suddenly we start to have to talk about Raynor as maybe he is the foreign GOAT. If he's won 2 straight world championships, maybe we have to start making that decision. But otherwise, I mean, Cyril, he's got every jewel that he's reasonably going to get. He's probably not going to get a GSL. He's probably not going to go live in Korea. But what else is there for him to win now?
The only people, that's the thing. People are always going to bring up the GSL. They're always going to make that argument. And it's so stupid because he's not going to compete in it. It doesn't make sense for him to do so. And if he were to do so, it would be the most disadvantageous thing he could do, because he would be stepping into a situation where he would have absolutely no support whatsoever. He would be going up against everyone. Every single person would be looking to defend the GSL title. There would be so much Korean pride on the line that you would have players that would sacrifice, I genuinely believe this, that they would sacrifice their own position in the tournament in order to help the players that were going up against him prepare.
Wow.
I genuinely believe that the Koreans would do that, because that would be at that point, it does become undisputed. If he goes to Korea and wins his first GSL, it's absolutely undisputed as the GOAT. Like, and you can't, no one can make the argument against it. It's just wrong.
And remember, he does technically have a GSL. Technically, he has the GSL versus the world back in 2019 where he beat a laser.
Bam, people aren't going to give us... People still say that Super Tournament doesn't count as a GSL. They're not going to give us that one.
That's only half, dude. That's only half.
Right?
More like a quarter, you know. Although when Neeb won his Kespa Cup, they gave him that. So like, you know,
That yeah, I it's so like if it has GSL in the name, you know, I don't know. It's
yeah. Well, GSL
It's-
considers the GSL Super Tournament GSLs. They give you the pins for it. So
So there you go. Like,
you
but people just want their you know, oh, Protoss hasn't won a major turn or a GSL in 2.7 millennia.
yeah, but they've
It's
won
been-
every Super Tournament. Well,
Yeah,
Rogue got one at the end of the
exactly.
year, but
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like, going back to what you're saying, Steadfast, how long would you have to stay in Korea in order to participate for the GSL? Is it like 6 months or something like that?
it was like 3 months.
I think it'd probably be 2 to 3 months, but actually no, with qualifiers, it would probably be like 3 months at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of like downtime to like you're giving up like other tournaments just to do this one thing, and it wouldn't be in your favor essentially.
Yeah.
And you're giving up the ability to like operate with your brain cloud, you know, like it would be like, so people don't realize how much the players interact with one another. Like they, even if you're not practicing with someone, he's going to be talking with Lambo all the time. He's going to be talking with Raynor. He's going to be talking with the Laser. Like he is going to be communicating. They're going to be discussing strategies. And if he moves to Korea, he can still do that, but he's going to be doing it on a very disadvantageous schedule. He's not going to be able to bounce ideas. He's not going to be able to be like, okay, well, let's hop into a custom game. The concept of practicing customs cross server is very silly. Like it doesn't, So he could still practice on the Korean ladder and he's going to get great practice, but it's going to completely change and alter his playstyle overall. And maybe over the course of, you know, like a year and a half or even a year, it makes him a stronger player. But before that, his play is going to suffer, if anything.
Sarah was just waiting for that region lock to get removed, you know?
Remember, No Regret is bringing the Foreigner House back. I believe he moved back to Korea 2 or 3 weeks ago to get that thing set up.
Yeah, like a month or two ago,
Yeah. So maybe if the Laser goes back and Scarlet goes back and Estrella goes back and I think they're actually planning on. I saw an interview where they got even more space set up this time. I think they're going to make it bigger and better, quote unquote. So we get all of them. Maybe then we get Cyril. I think Cyril's been pretty vocal about never wanting to go to Korea. He just doesn't want to leave Finland for that amount of time. But hey, the Foreigner House, maybe. I don't know. I'm hoping. But
it would be cool. But once again, he'd be doing it because other people are like, you're not to go because you haven't won a G. Like, and at that point, why? Like, if he wants to do it for himself, by all means, I would be so excited to see Cyril in GSL.
Oh, yeah.
And it might actually make me watch GSL live again. Like, I might actually watch GSL live. You know, sleep schedule be damned. If Raynor or Cyril were to play in it once again, because even I remember Raynor playing in it and like getting top 8 in his first GSL. That made me pretty excited because that was before Raynor was like really, really at his top peak, and he was already making the Korean sweat a lot. So a Cyril in peak form, a Raynor in peak form.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Oh, man, think about the viewership GSL would get. Like, I was watching the No Regret interview. He was like, yeah, we have demonstrative proof that with the Foreigner House, the numbers of those groups of foreigners were in were like twice as good. They would get massive viewership bumps. Blizzard was really imagine Cyril and Raynor go into the Foreigner House. I mean, you're getting like IEM numbers probably for the groups that they're in for their play days. But to put a pin on IEM, we've talked about everything. The games were absolutely incredible. Probably overall one of the better tournaments we've had just in terms of overall gameplay. I don't think that's hyper-realistic. Bunch of good storylines too. As we put a pin on things, Steadfast, what were your favorite moments, favorite stories, games, whatever else?
Well, it's that's almost an unfair question because of how good the tournament was. But the Ryung in the round of 36 was awesome. I think Cyril's return as an offline monster was freaking amazing. Hero Marine's run was legendary and so exciting for him and for his fans. There's like a ton of good storylines. There's a cute one kind of where Lambo has become the unofficial world champion by being the one to officially knock out Zest, which is a cute little thing that Liquipedia tracks, and that's kind of cool. I mean, the fact that it was the first offline tournament that we've had in what, 2.5 years, 2 years. That's very, very exciting too. For me personally, I can't wait till the next NA tournament. That's going to be really awesome. I think DreamHack Atlanta is the next offline tournament, so that's going to be really cool.
DreamHack Valencia.
Sorry, NA
Okay,
tournament. Yeah. But yeah, no, there was just a ton. There was just a ton of awesome events and a ton of awesome storylines.
How about you, Nish?
Yeah, for me, favorite games, dude. Round of 36, Spirits. Like all the Spirits games were kind of like those intro to StarCraft if you're a new viewer, you know, like you get to see nukes, you get to see battle cruisers, you get to see all this like late game play, you get to see all the things that you want to see out of StarCraft. And yeah, he really brought the best out of like all these other players too. And just like I said, his Widowmine drop play was just so awesome, dude. Like it was frustrating as a viewer, especially like dealing with that. And yeah, so Spirits games I absolutely loved, especially Estrella Spirit in game 2 on, was it Hardwire, where he nukes the third base and loses like 36 probes.
Yeah, that
was like crazy. Twitter was just like, oh my gosh, 36 probes lost. Go watch it now. Like it was a back and forth thing, and it was awesome. Like I said, every game that he played went late game, battle cruisers, nukes everywhere. Favorite stories, I would have to say Hero Marine, his run, especially leading up to that one moment where Smix asks him, how does it feel? And he's just like, it definitely feels like a Monday.
Yeah.
And that moment just brought a smile to my face, dude. I was watching. I was so happy for him, and I almost shed a tear for him, dude, because he was just playing so well. It was absolutely beautiful. And yeah, an offline event, dude. It feels great to be back, especially with the live audience and seeing all these passionate people of StarCraft just attend this event. It was absolutely incredible, man. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's enough to put a pin in it. IEM Katowice was insane. We love the storylines. We love everything else. But before we go, I'd like to take a moment to remind you that we had 2 awesome guests. We have Nish here, the StarCraft Observer. Make sure to go check him out. That's at the StarcraftObs. You can see him right here. Apparently he's tweeting about me, which is nice. I'll take the... that'll make me very, very happy. And then, of course, the man of the other half of the Archon, we have Steadfast, at Steadfast SC2. Make sure to check him out. Yeah, he got partner about a year ago. That's crazy. And of course...
Yeah, it's
pretty cool. He's got the check mark. He validates everything we do here. But for now, folks, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll catch you next time. And for Steadfast, for me, for everyone else, stay safe out there. Love you all.